Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Tuesday community chat. I'm Eli Beckman. I'm the mayor. We've also got some top town staff here. We've got Town Manager Todd Cusimano, Assistant Town Manager and Town Clerk Rebecca Vaughn, Fire Chief Ruben Martin, Planning and Building Director Adam Wolf. We've got a couple others on the line, and we're very lucky to be joined by our special guest, our trusty County Supervisor, Mr. Dennis Rodoni. I am going to kind of shut my mouth here and let the experts do the talking for this one. Don't want to waste our time with Dennis here. So Mr. Supervisor, I'll turn it over to you. I understand you might want to give us a little update on the COVID situation, and then I think we'll open it up for questions. I'm sure we've got a lot of folks on the line eager to ask you about various issues.
Yeah, thank you, Eli. Mayor Beckman, it's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite, and I want to thank all your staff for attending also. I thought I'd start today with the breaking news or the good news coming out of the COVID. Today, Marin County moved to Tier 3, which is the orange tier. And what that means is that allowed indoors now at full capacity are retail establishments, indoor malls, libraries, office space, although continued telework is encouraged for all of those locations. Allowed indoors at 50% or 200 people capacity, whichever is fewer, are restaurants, museums, place of worship, and movie theaters. And allowed at 25% capacity or 100 people or fewer are gymnasiums, fitness centers, and you can utilize indoor pools at that rate, family entertainment centers, wineries, and card rooms, and allowed outdoors only are bars and breweries. So it's a substantial shift in the opening up more of the economy and allowing more capacity in these places. But I do want to direct people to the Marin Recovery's website for specific types of businesses if you have questions or need guidelines. And also, Matt Willis would not like me to go forward without reminding people that we still have a risk of a pandemic in play here, and the likelihood of additional cases is pretty high when you open up more and more of the economy. And so how we balance that and how we deal with that is really how we're able to maintain our Tier 3 going forward and not have to slip backwards to one of the other tiers, which would be more restrictive, and the closing of some of these establishments or reducing the number of people. So people need to pay attention, wear face covering, social distance, do all the things that we've been practicing for so long. And it's even more important now as we have the twin epidemic, which is the flu season coming upon us now. So getting a flu shot and these same practices will help you avoid the flu too, along with the COVID. So I encourage people to keep doing that and not relax as we move into Halloween, Thanksgiving, and the holidays. It's really important that people pay attention to this, because individually we all are the ones that are going to make a difference of how successful we are moving forward. So that's my update on the COVID. Hopefully that's good news. I did just want to share with you, as of yesterday, we had 4,858 positive cases in Marin, and of those, you have 113 cases that have tested positive in Corte Madera. So I'm going to stop there because I know there's a lot of people maybe perhaps wanting to ask questions, and I'm looking forward to hearing.
All right, thank you very much, Supervisor. Before we open this thing up for questions, Todd, were there any town updates that you or any of the department heads wanted to give?
No, same. I'll leave this to Supervisor Rodoni and get him as much time as possible. I just want to also recognize Omar Carrera. He is part of the Canal Allegiance, and he's our very own Corte Madera resident, does a lot of great things for the community. He's also on the call as well when we think about, equity and any social issues in our communities as well. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Glad to have Omar with us. Canal Alliance is a fantastic organization. Okay, well, with that, we've got a decent number of folks on the line here. We're going to go ahead and open this up to your guys' questions. So if you have any questions for any of us or for Supervisor Rodoni, please go ahead and put your hand up via Zoom and we will get you on here. We're going to start with Scott and then go to Elizabeth.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Much better. Sorry, I'm a little technologically challenged this afternoon, I guess. First off, thanks, Supervisor Rodoni, for joining us today. I greatly appreciate you taking the time. I had some comments and questions more about the proposed homeless shelter in Corte Madera and not about the COVID update. So I'm assuming now is an appropriate time to bring that up as well. Great, I see some nodding heads. So for the record, I support finding suitable housing for homeless and marine, including in Corte Madera. So in my particular case, this isn't a not in my backyard issue, but there are some things that trouble me about the project that's currently being considered Project Home Key. The first relates to the speed that this is moving. Now, of course, I know that this is being pushed under the COVID-19 pandemic, but my own belief is that while that's an obvious crisis, it doesn't justify pushing it forward too quickly because this homeless shelter is going to live long beyond the COVID pandemic. The second set of issues around lack of community awareness and community engagement. I think it's critical that residents in Corte Madera be allowed sufficient time to provide input and express concerns, because I think doing so is going to give us an opportunity to embrace the project longer term and even perhaps contribute and volunteer. And I think that would be something I could see the town getting behind. There's also some lack of transparency. We've had county folks on a number of calls, and there's some questions that remain unanswered. And then finally, I just don't think this is a good site for a homeless shelter. The county itself admits that it's not an ideal location. It was picked mainly because the hotel was willing to sell itself, not because it was ideally suited as a homeless shelter. And my fear is that by rushing this to meet a state budget deadline, that we could be making a bad choice for not only residents of Corte Madera, but also for the potential homeless folks that could be involved. So before I let you respond, Supervisor Rodino, I do hope there's a couple of asks, if I may, and we could also cover these on a future call. But one is, I do think there's a need to raise greater community awareness about this. There's still a lot of folks that are not aware of what's going on. I know Mayor Beckman, the town has made efforts to raise awareness, but not everybody reads the newsletter. No offense to whoever writes it. And not everybody sees the billboard that's out in front of the town hall. So number one is a greater effort to raise awareness. Two is I'd very much like to see if we could form some sort of task force that's made up of community representatives, town, county, et cetera, that meets on an ongoing basis that could help manage this project and make sure that we have input on how it looks and who's housed there. I just think getting that kind of group together would be really useful, again, to engage the community. Another one would be a single point of contact in the county for us to work with on an ongoing basis if there are issues that come up. I also think some sort of on-site security and a commitment by the city to ramp up police patrols in this area. And then lastly, and I know this is a big concern, an opportunity to screen residents in the shelter for serious or violent criminal records. Sorry, I know I said lastly, but I have one more. I'll let you guys write all this stuff down, but I am a resident, so I have an opportunity to have a whole bunch of demands. But the other one would just be, I think there's some concerns about the fact that this project's being transitioned from one group to another, in this case, the county, to a nonprofit. And a written commitment by the county that in fact, this will be moved from temporary to permanent housing. I think many people have a different opinion about temporary shelter versus permanent. I think there'd be more support for permanent housing. And so if there's a written commitment on the part of the county that we could adhere to that says, in fact, this will be converted to permanent housing in the near term, that'd be great. So I'll be quiet and let you respond.
Thank you, Scott. So you had quite a few questions in there. Let me try and cover as many as I can, as quickly as I can. Yeah, we were dealt this opportunity by the state, and we didn't have a lot of say about the timeline. And because it's CARES funding that expires December 31st, the state sets all the deadlines for us. And each hotel, depending on when it was funded, has a different deadline that the state sets for closing. And yes, we'd love to do this differently and have a lot of community input and community engagement. But we're limited to the time we have that the state's given us to make a decision on this in order to keep the funding in place. And we're trying to do as much as we can, working with the city of Corte Madera, and we will continue to work with the city of Corte Madera through this process and this decision making, and even beyond if we move forward with the purchase of this hotel, because it's right in your city and everyone in the city is very concerned about what will happen here, wants to make sure it happens properly and happens with the city's input. I agree that something organized with the city may be taking the lead, but I would look to Mayor Beckman and the city manager to see if that's something they want to develop, because I do think it's while it's a county purchase, the city could take the lead on those sorts of things to help us engage with their community if they so choose. Um, Part of the project description and requirements are that you need to have a 50% occupancy within 30 days after closing. I believe it's 30, and I might be wrong. It could be 60. And that's why they have developed an interim permanent housing sort of criteria. And I want to stress that this is not a homeless shelter, because this isn't a place where people drop into or line up around the block trying to get a bed. These are pre-selected, pre-screened individuals who are allowed after the screening to use this facility. And so initially when it's set up, it will probably be people who are moving out of the room key hotels that are now providing temporary shelter to people who are subject to the COVID virus and are most vulnerable, that need to move into some other housing in the short term. And they could be likely candidates for the long term also. But the long term at this location has to happen a little bit later down the road. I don't think we have a timetable yet, because this is moving so quickly that we just don't have it all set in stone about how this will happen. But very soon, there'll be a timetable where we'll be converting these units. I believe having to put small kitchens into these units, so they can become long-term permanent supportive housing. And the supportive part is really important too, because that's something the county's been doing for over 3 years, is placing homeless people who are most vulnerable in housing first, and then wrapping all the county services around them and bringing the services to them where they're being housed, making sure that they're meeting all the guidelines set forth in them being in that housing, making sure they have the mental health that they need, people that come and visit with them. They have a social worker that's responsible for them, and they're continually checked out and supported depending on what their needs are. And as this program develops, we're finding that as time goes, these homeless people need less and less of this support as they develop sort of their own living conditions and find even employment in some cases and move on to the next phase in their life. But because this will be permanent supportive housing, the ultimate project will support people for as long as they want to live there. And it will be permanent housing and pretty stabilized in most cases. And anyone that comes into this establishment will be pre-screened and pre-selected for this location. And as you know, we have 3 locations we're looking at, one in Corte Madera, one in San Rafael, and one in Novato. The Corte Madera one is thought of as a individual homeless person permanent housing. The one in San Rafael is thought of as more interim supportive housing and working with Mill Street. And then the one in Novato is being thought of as, and again, I'm being thought of because all these plans are not set in stone yet, being thought of as family housing for homeless families. So there's some definite details that will be coming out. The website, I believe, is at RenHHS/HomeKey is being developed now, which will have a lot of the details on it about the purchase, about how they're being acquired, what the deadlines and guidelines are, and then also about how these individual places will be run and who will be managing them. And in some cases, like the Corte Madera property, I don't think it's determined yet whether someone else will own it. We know someone else will manage it, but it's very likely, because of the size of that project, the county will continue to own that project. Where in Novato, we're looking at Eden Homes, who develop affordable housing, and putting together some sort of financial package together to actually convert that to non-county ownership and put it in the ownership of Eden Housing, who will manage and support it. So it's depending on what location you're in, there's different scenarios. And those are mostly based on the size of the hotel and what they would support long term. So I don't know if I got all your questions answered, Scott. I don't know if Todd wants to comment or Mayor Beckman, but you're welcome to.
I would just say that when it comes to working with the county to get the word out, I think our staff has already been doing a fantastic job of raising awareness via every channel we have available to us. If Supervisor, if you are aware of ways that we could partner with the county to be even more effective, I think we're ready and willing to be partners with you on that, because we definitely want to make sure that we've got the broadest coalition possible, that we have all residents aware of what's going on. Todd, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, just lastly, I think Scott hit the head on the nail with the task force. I think there's a lot of, we're working hard for the fact sheet to educate us all and catch up. But as Supervisor Rodoni said, this is moving so fast that there are so many issues that we're going to have to problem solve between the county, the town, and the residents, that a task force is absolutely necessary. And I know Adam's been working with the county staff and Scott and our residents to, what does that look like potentially, and how do we make decisions as a group moving forward? So I think that's definitely going to be one of the key points, Scott. So I think we hear you loud and clear, and I know our staff is working towards that. And I think ultimately for the November 2nd meeting, when we take this item to the council, just to get them up to speed and our residents on where exactly we are, I think that's our theme, as our feedback back to the Board of Supervisors of, this is what success looks like for Corte Madera. And that task force component will be a key part of that.
Great. All right. Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you, Scott. We've got quite a few hands up, so I'm just going to try and move us through these relatively briskly. I'd love if everybody gets a chance to speak. And just want to let folks know that we do have to stop at 5 sharp, because we've got the staff and myself have another meeting, a pension workshop that we're moving into right after this, which everybody is welcome to join as well. So with that, we're going to move on to Elizabeth, followed by Barbara.
Hi guys, thanks so much for taking my question. I also have a concern about Project Home Key in Corte Madera, but first, Supervisor Rodoni, thank you so much for joining us. I agree with many of Scott's sentiments and love the task force idea. I think I can speak for many on the line here that in saying that we all care about addressing the homelessness. Unfortunately, out of the hours, I've probably spent close to a dozen hours learning about this project. This plan doesn't, it has a lot of serious holes that have not been addressed. And while I have about a dozen written down here, I'm going to limit to just 3 for the sake of brevity. So first, there's no transparency around who will be living here. A lot of jargon has been thrown around, yet no clear answers addressing the demographic of prospective residents. I mean, are we talking about elderlies with MS, addicted meth users, sex offenders? Nobody knows. Second, there's an overwhelming amount of data around the impact on property value. And in fact, in the New York Times, they reported that a homeowner would expect to get about 24 to 25% less for a house or condominium within a few blocks of a homeless shelter than a residence further away. I personally did not spend 7 figures on my home in Corte Madera just for it to decrease in value less than a year later. And finally, the location of this facility alone is very far from bus stop or affordable grocery shopping, and it seems really impractical to expect someone to sit in a 220 square foot room all day, having no proximity to anywhere for them to go. Sounds like there's going to be a lot of unwanted loitering, both for businesses and, residents. So I'll close with just stating that, it's coming off as if the county is a bit distracted by the funding. And I keep hearing a lot of, we're moving really, really fast. And that's bringing me more alarm. I fear that we're losing sight of what's really important, and that's helping people. And as I said, sadly, this plan it's not sounding like what's gonna really help homeless people. It sounds like it's actually going to harm your tax-paying residents. So again, ultimately, my question is, how can we partner with you to ensure that residents have your support and our protection?
Thank you. Appreciate the question, Elizabeth. I think we've tried to be as transparent as we could within the timetable that we've been dealt. We just learned about this opportunity in mid-July, and ever since then, we were trying to figure out if we were going to actually receive a grant or not. We thought we were going to get 1, and we ended up getting 3 at the end. So there's been a lot of things going on, and trying to be as transparent as we can. But quite honestly, the timetable has been really tight, even for us. And we've tried to share as much as we can with the city and city staff and with city managers and with council members as soon as we possibly could. So quite honestly, we're caught by surprise about this opportunity of 3 actually being possible. The Casa Buena one was a priority because it was a willing owner, and that's really the criteria which gets this whole state program started, is there has to be a willing owner. We reached out to motel and hotel owners and asked them if anyone would be interested in this program. And so these property owners that are in the grant program at this point have all volunteered their properties to be in this program. And I think that's important to realize that we didn't pick these sites. You're right. Had we chose to go around and do a survey and figure out where would be the ideal location, we may not have picked these particular sites or this particular site in Corte Madera. But I can tell you that because of the small size and the management team that we're putting together, we believe that we'll be able to manage this in a way that would satisfy the neighborhood and the city. Little things like transportation throughout the last 3 years, we've already dealt with those issues because we have homeless people that are scattered throughout Marin taking advantage of the landlord partnership program, where they may be in individual multi-unit apartment buildings. We use vouchers for transportation, for bus service, vouchers for taxis, all sorts of other ways that we're able to give them transportation to get where they need to be. And most of that's to keep them in the program and to get them appointments they need to see. I think it's going to be a pretty stable population ultimately, once it's turned into permanent supportive housing with potentially 18 individuals living on the property. And then it would be, and these would be pre-selected individuals that are screened to make sure that they can be successful in this sort of environment. We can't really tell you who they are or what the criteria would be, because it really depends on quite a bit of review by a committee of people who know the homeless people and know about them, and they all sit in a room of maybe 10 people and decide what the best program is for that individual, how they should be housed, and what sort of housing they might want to be in or could be in. On top of that, there would be an on-site security person and possibly even some sort of a manager, because of the unit that's a manager's unit there. We'll provide the type of in-house security that we need to make sure that everyone's in the units stay safe, and everyone in the neighborhood stays safe. I'm not sure I answered all your questions. The tax base is certainly a question that comes up. We've been looking for good data related to that. From our experience so far in Marin, we haven't experienced that shift in property values related to locations. In particular, one was brought up today. There's a drug and alcohol treatment program at the Altamira in Sausalito, and the neighbors had a lot of concerns similar to what we're hearing today on this show and in Novato earlier today. And none of those have proven to be true, because it's a well-managed establishment that now the neighbors and the community feel is an asset to the community. And so that's what we hope to achieve here. That's what our goal would be. And the county is committed to make sure that they work to that goal along with the city. So I think some of these questions you brought up can be addressed with the task force that the city's proposing.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you, Elizabeth. We're going to go next to Barbara and then to Kristen.
Yeah, hello. Thank you for letting me speak, and welcome to Supervisor Rodoni. Appreciate you being here. I just want to second or third all the things that both Scott and Elizabeth have said. And I have had a conversation with Scott before. He made some very good points. The one I would really, I am not opposed to the concept of this at all, but I do feel as if the timing of this, right before this critical election, and in the midst of a pandemic, when none of us feel like we have any control over our lives. And now it feels as if this project is being rammed down our throats without the community having any say in it. I think that's going to be very upsetting to a lot of people. So it's not well known in the community that this project is going on. And once people hear about it, I think you're going to get a lot of pushback. I think the idea of a task force, a community task force, is excellent. I'm a longtime volunteer in the community. I would love to be part of that task force. I'm also a former assistant city attorney, so could help maybe with some of the issues. And my concern, other than what Scott's and Elizabeth said, is that I don't know what the demographics of the residents are going to be, but I listened to the home key presentation and they were very, very vague as to what kind of demographics there were going to be. And I felt as if they were avoiding answering the questions because they didn't want to raise anyone's hackles. Depending on the demographics, just having a security guard there or a manager on site is not going to be enough. There may be a need for 24-hour psychiatric or social worker services on site. And as a task force member, I will want to kind of keep that in mind all the way along. So, yeah, and the timing, the rushing of it does not make for good government practices at all. So I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I do believe that motel was sometimes used as a place to put parolees, county parolees, for temporary housing. Does anyone on the town know if that's true? Because that could affect how people feel about it. That we've had parolees living there. What's wrong with homeless people living there? So.
Yeah, I mean, I can take that really quick, Barbara, if it's okay, Mr. Mayor. I'm working on some statistics right now with the chief of police, and hopefully I have them for Thursday. I'll definitely have them for our November 2nd meeting. But I said this in one of our previous meetings. I think what you're going to find, I think, Lily mentioned it with the county before in one of the first meetings, that the word homeless shelter. And then and the conversation continues now. That is not really the intent. The intent is short-term housing and turning into long-term housing, right? That's what we're doing here. And so that matters when you talk about, cost to any impacts to the neighborhood, calls for service. If you look at historical numbers, and you touched on it, Barbara, it wasn't just parolees. This specific hotel, the hotel right down the street, and one of the hotels on Tamil Vista, you will see more calls for service for those 3 hotels individually and collectively. You'll see more calls for service than what we're talking about right now. Calls for service will drastically lower. And because we have comparisons, apples to apples comparisons on this type of project in Marin County, Larkspur, and other areas. And so that's what we're going to see. I'm just giving you guys a hint that those are facts. You will see that, but we'll show you and we'll walk you through it. So, but I do agree with all the neighbors, Supervisor Rodoni. There are 2 key points. One is really from the county level and I know Adam on our team is working on with the county staff, is really spelling out to our community, this is not a short-term shelter. We're looking at housing, and also doing improvements to the site that'll improve property values in the area. And the second one is the task force concept is important, but I know on our 13 San Clemente project, when they were going through, I know the owners of that project, when they were actually screening residents, Central Marin Police Authority was part of that screening process. Now, they were just one voice of many, like you said, there's 10 in the room, I think, for the county. We would like to be part of that. We would like to have representation, potentially part of that conversation, because I think it'll help us, talk to our residents, letting them know that the process is whole, it's right, we support it, and it makes sense for us. It's part of what success looks like for Corte Madera. So I think those are some really key, important conversation points as we move forward over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. And just for those on the line, calls for service is 911 calls. Supervisor, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Just to quickly add that this is not something new for the county in terms of dealing with housing first and whole person care. We've been doing this for 3 years. We've actually housed 291 people in that program and had a 90% success rate so far, that people are still in the program 3 years later, some 3 years later, some more recent, obviously. 91 have been housed in that program since COVID started. So this is a very, very successful program that's got a lot of dollars committed to it, but most important, the types of services, the types of security, the types of transportation, all the questions you can think of, either come with a program or will be developed with a need at the program. And it could be down to an individual needs a special arrangements for something that they need in person. We're trying to do that at that level because that's how we're making sure that people can be successful in this program and have a successful outcome. And the successful outcome for these individuals means a successful outcome for the city of Corte Madera also.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you, Barbara. And also thanks, Barbara, for your willingness to serve on the task force. Adam, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, Mayor Beckman, thanks. I just wanted to chime in on the noticing. I actually have a couple hundreds of envelopes already printed with addresses right now. We're just trying to format some of the information about not only the town council meeting coming up on November 2nd, but also obviously the Board of Supervisors meeting on the 10th, and provide links to information, the last few meetings that we've had as a community here, and put that out, mail that out pretty much. You know, there was a request to do it for the entire town. My suggestion is that we're doing it actually from Sanford, basically all the way wrapping around Meadowsweet and Casa Buena and that entire hillside there. And so that's the mailer that we'll probably do, which is several hundred, at least several hundred envelopes that will go out very shortly. And we're planning on tomorrow.
Beautiful. Thank you, Adam. And I just want to thank you, Adam, and all the staff for, you guys have been so responsive to the fantastic comments that we've seen from residents. I think we've gotten a lot of really good suggestions, and I'm really glad to see us moving to act on those. With that, thank you, Barbara. We're going to move on to Kristen and then Lucinda.
Hi there. I just want to say thank you very much for joining in today. I really appreciate it. And I just have two quick questions. I do understand the allure of the funds that are being provided by the state, and I do understand the homelessness issue that's going on. I echo what Scott and Elizabeth and Barbara have all said, and I do have a lot of concerns over the location and what's going on. So my question to you is, you have 3 properties potentially in Marin to house the chronically homeless that are at risk for COVID. How many rooms are there that you're given? And how many chronically homeless people would be feeling this task? I'm trying to understand if it's 100 homeless folks that you're trying to house and 100 rooms, or is there a discrepancy between those? I would like to understand that. And the second question is, given that in the Bay Area, and this is on the Project Home Key website from the state, in our area, we have 6 times more people that are extremely disadvantaged, which means they are housed, but in very high risk for losing their homes due to the COVID situation in particular. So I understand that we have this funding that we're using for homelessness and homeless folks, but have you considered using that funding to help support all of our residents that are going to be losing their homes and going to become homeless, and instead helping them? We in Corte Madera, we do have a fund that our fantastic town has put together for providing some rent or mortgage, but at a county level, given that you have all this extra funding, have you considered that?
Going to the issue about funding, this is special state funding that can only be used for the home key projects. And in fact, if we don't close on the date that they tell us we have to close on, that funding gets offered to other towns and cities around the state, or worst case scenario, December 31st goes back to the federal government as unused CARES money. Total 132 rooms is what we're planning for if we end up closing all 3 of these opportunities. You're right, though. We know with COVID, there's a lot more people that are at risk of being homeless. And that's what we're seeing in particular around the family center in Novato that serves homeless families, is they have more demand and a waiting list for people who need shelter, need places to shelter and permanent housing. And so, the commitment of the county has always been to try and find more permanent housing for homeless people. We have about roughly 12 to 1,300 homeless people that have been identified in Marin. We know about little less than 400 of those are the most vulnerable and the ones that really need to get put into housing. But with the COVID, that whole situation is changing and becoming more and more precarious as people end up potentially not being able to pay the rent, getting evicted. The county has committed substantial funds to rental assistance. We've with the community foundation and the county, we put over $3 million into the rental assistance program. We've also put another more than $1.5 million into the income replacement program to allow people who are COVID positive to be able to quarantine for 10 to 14 days and miss work so that their income is replaced so they can pay their rent or put food on their table. So we have been committing a lot of other dollars that the county controls to both of those things that, you know, ultimately will help postpone what may be the end line, which is people still are going to have trouble paying their rent. And so we're continuing to work on those items, but this home key opportunity and this grant is a totally separate thing. It's limited to the one type of purchase. It's limited to creating permanent supportive housing in a very short time. It's committed to very soon after closing, having at least 50% occupancy. And that's why we have to look at an interim permanent housing solution, because we know we can't put kitchens, for example, in the Corte Madera hotel in time to meet that deadline. So we have to move in a way that we get 50% occupancy to meet the state guidelines. You know, we spent a lot of money on housing homeless people. We spent a lot of money on the homeless population. We spend every day in the cities and counties spend a tremendous amount of money dealing with homeless people through our police force, to our emergency rooms, to our emergency calls. And we're hoping that these types of programs will actually save money in the long term for many of our cities and our counties by having homeless people in permanent supportive housing with wraparound services. So I'm just going to stop there, but it's 132 total rooms. We probably have over almost 300 existing apartments and rooms that are housing homeless people currently, 291 to be exact.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you, Kristen. We're going to go to Lucinda and then Kate.
Thank you very much for being with us today, Mr. Rodani. It's a pleasure. And I love to hear the direct information from you. I would like to understand why this 12/31 deadline was assessed, and why, because it's just causing an awful lot of concern from everybody to do this in a rushed endeavor without all of the proper vetting that needs to be done. And why haven't we applied for an extension, a reasonable extension to this, so that that can be done properly and it can get out to people and they can know what's happening in our town. I just am very concerned that it's a rush factor, and I ditto what has been said before me about the specific concerns. I don't want to hash over them again because you've already heard them, but it's just insane that they do this so quickly. And I know that we never want to let money go back to the federal government that we could utilize, but there's got to be a way to extend the deadline. And I can't understand why it hasn't been explored. And if it has, maybe it hasn't been explored with the depths that it needs to be. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think it's something we have control over. The program was set up by the governor. He's committed to creating permanent housing for homeless people. And that's part of the program he put forth. This is federal dollars, you're correct, that December 31st, any unspent CARES money that the state has to go back to for this program at least, has to go back to the federal government. And so the driving forces are not the county with a choice to ask for an extension. It's just not possible. We were told from the very beginning that this extension is not possible. You have to live with our guidelines and our timeline if you're in this program to take advantage of this grant, because other people are in line waiting for this money. And we as a state is very committed to spending this money and not having to give it back. And so that all leads to the crunch of the timeline that you're talking about. And agree, we wish it was different, but we also understand that this is one opportunity that we at least have to go through the steps and figure out if we can move forward with this or not, and try and take advantage of it. And we do feel at the county and the housing staff around the county of Marin feel very, very fortunate that we are talking about 3 opportunities here, because no one expected to be more than one. I think there was only 300 million for the whole Bay Area, and the county of Marin is looking at potentially 22 million for Marin only, if all 3 of these projects go through.
Could I follow up on just a little bit more? Is this a one-time shot with this money for getting the homeless in place? And then what happens on an ongoing basis? Who pays for all of the services that are going to be required? And who is going to be able to watch over that and do a proper accounting?
Sure. So to answer your question, a separate grant funding from the state provides 2 years of managing these sites. So it is covered for 2 years. The county is committed, whatever it would take to provide this wraparound services, because quite honestly, we're spending that money anyway in just different ways, offering services to homeless that may not be as effective. So, and then that's where the partners that are becoming partners with the county, in the case of Eden, they would work to generate funding to support the program after 2 years. I don't think we've gotten that far on the Corte Madera hotel, determining how that long-term funding would happen, but the county is committed to making sure that the funding's in place to continue this program as we've stipulated with the state. Todd, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just Mr. Mayor, I recommend, we have about 7 people, and I just want them all to be able to ask their question, but I ask if it's possible for them to ask their question as succinctly and rapidly as possible, or make a statement, and then we'll take all their statements and give Supervisor Rodoni, we have 15 minutes, an opportunity to answer as many as possible. And anything we can't get, we'll get those in our fact sheet, and we'll make sure that we get those answers back to our community.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. We've got 15 minutes, guys, and at least 7 hands up. So that's, that's barely 2 minutes a person. So let us try and pick up the pace here so that everybody can get a chance. Thank you, Lucinda. Thank you, Supervisor. With that, we're going to go to Kate and then Phyllis. And again, folks, if once we get you on here, if you could just be as succinct as possible, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kate. I'm going to go as fast as possible. Okay, so I have some concerns that have been brought up by every single person who's gone before me. So I echo that. Count me for one more of concerns there. But one that you just brought up today. So one of my biggest concerns is the screening of the residents. And and you said that a lot of these people, like, we should feel better because they've probably, have been part of the project room key. And honestly, that makes it almost more concerning for me. I've just heard a lot of negative commentary just in the news, but also from people I know who work at the hotels where Project Room Key has housed people. There's been several of the people that I know that work at these hotels have been actually really scared to go to work. There's been a lot of damage, a lot of crime, drug use. There was a meth lab started in San Francisco. There's just a lot that we've been hearing both in the news and also just personally from friendships that brings me a lot of concern and a lot of hesitation about that. And also sort of on that, brought up in previous calls, it said there would be no priority given to Corte Madera homeless. And so I think that's kind of a bummer, if it's our town and our homeless people, the people that we actually walk around and see, and they're not going to live there. We have 37 or whatever of them. I think they should get priority. I also, as a person who's lived other places, I've lived near residents such as these before. And I gotta say, you know, the calls for service thing also doesn't make me feel any better. A lot of times I myself have called, you know, out of fear, both for my safety and also my possessions. And oftentimes what happens, at least in my experience, is, you know, the quality of life goes down, but the police show up and there's nothing they can do, you know, because it all comes down to legally, what can they do? They can't do anything a lot of times. And so the quality of life goes down for the neighbors, but there's nothing the police can do to help. I also, you know, find it incredibly disappointing that a flyer wasn't thought of before one of these attendees on the call brought it up. I think it's ridiculous, and it seems like feet are kind of being dragged here. It was brought up a couple weeks ago, or at least over a week ago. It doesn't take that long to put that together. So it's just a little disappointing to know that that was brought up, first of all, not thought of by you guys, and then brought up a little while ago and hasn't even been sent out yet. And also the fact that you're only going to include a small surrounding area, I think is a big mistake. Corte Madera is not that big of a town. It's not like we're trying to, you know, tell all of San Francisco what's going on. Corte Madera is extremely small. It's our parks, it's our libraries, it's our restaurants, it's our malls, and we should know who's gonna be joining us. And I do have a question, believe it or not. So what exactly are you hoping to achieve with these residents? I think, you know, what you say like, oh, we have this rate of success. What is success for this population? Because, you know, I don't work in this industry. I don't know. And it seems as though you're going to be bringing in people who, like, is success for them to grow into being, you know, a contributing part of the town. Like, I don't think they're going to be able to have a job and get a house here, you know? So I'm just confused about that, I guess. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate. Appreciate it, the questions. So success, I think, is from HHS point of view, is people remaining in the program and not ending up back at the street. Beyond that, success is that they do become successful citizens and end up in employment. And in the case of what we're proposing here, this could be their permanent housing for as long as they need to stay there until they're able or capable or want to move on to other things. But I think success is kind of in the mind of the holder a little bit, because from the county and I think city's perspective, getting these people off of the streets is a success, and into permanent housing is a success.
Sorry to interject
key
here, but it just seems weird to prioritize this population above, you know, to someone's earlier point, you know, putting this money towards people who are currently working and either, you know, nurses, doctors, teachers, grocery store employees who can't afford this community, or maybe they're one of the ones that might lose their home because of COVID. You know, just, it seems a little strange to prioritize, you know, first of all, I don't know. Anyway, just, it seems like a weird priority.
Yeah. Yep. And getting to the room key question, room key is transitioning out. That program's transitioning to an end. And so the people that are already housed and already are living in conditions that have proven they can live in those conditions are likely candidates to be transitioned to permanent housing, because they've actually kind of met that earlier threshold. I don't think the types of things you described, we've experienced those in Marin. They may be in other areas. And many of those people working in motels were disaster workers, county disaster workers, who were county employees that were doing that work. And from the ones I've talked to, they thought the program went pretty well. The only complaint I got from them, and it was a fair complaint, was they didn't think they got fed enough for the work they were doing. The clients got very good meals, but they didn't feel that the disaster workers were treated well enough with meals. But certainly the clients were treated well. I'm going to move on, Eli, because I know there's running out of time.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor. Thank you, Kate. I'm sorry, guys, we're not gonna have time to get to everybody after that. So we'll go to Phyllis. We'll try and get to Omar. Joe, Steve, Stephen, and Mary, if we can't get to you guys, please write your questions in the chat or email us. I'm sorry about this. Phyllis is going to be up next.
Yes, thank you, Eli. Dennis, I don't think there's anybody that questions the need to help the most vulnerable in our community and to take care of the homeless. I think the problem is that the Board of Supervisors has created unnecessary controversy, especially when it's come to this planning and community development. After what I've read, after listening to you today, I mean, to call the home key process followed by the county Byzantine would be an insult to the people of Constantinople. In July, the governor announced these funds were available. That is when the town managers and council members should have been informed that this was available. Also that it was available if they could apply directly. It wasn't given only to counties, this ability. People then could have talked about it. The county could have said, we're going to apply for this. So when the money came in October, people were aware, people had been educated, people would understand. I mean, not doing this is really gross negligence on the part of Community Development Planning Director Lily Thomas and County Administrator Matthew Himmel. You may not have received those funds until October, but nothing kept you from informing the community. It's the responsibility of the Board of Supes to keep the community informed. That's part of county business. You're not only elected to represent us, you're elected to serve us. And it's also your responsibility to employ people who understand transparency and the need to provide cities and towns with the information to inform their own residents. It is very disturbing to see that people are now questioning what could be a wonderful program that everybody should be behind because of how this was handled. And I mean, the current members of the Board of Supes, as far as I'm concerned, are failing miserably when it comes to doing their job and to holding their employees responsible and how they serve the public. It's time that people in the Board of Supes understood there's a difference about what you have the right to do and what is right to do. And please start doing what's right to do. Be more open, let people ask questions. If it had been discussed starting in July and the money didn't come through, at least people would understand the situation and be ready to look at other programs that might come in and not be asking the questions that are being asked now.
Yeah, thank you. And Todd, please chip in here if you like, but the program was announced in July. It was available to any cities or counties in the state. I don't know what outreach that the state did. The county did notice this was available and working with a bunch of our partners who work in the homeless community, trying to resolve that issue. We tried to address it by, first of all, just sending letters out to anyone in the county who might be interested in participating by offering their property. And that's how the conversation started. We didn't know particularly where these locations were going to be until much later in the process. And as soon as we did know and we had a viable location, we did try to reach out to the cities and council members, but I agree that was much later than we would have liked. But again, we didn't have those answers. One from the people willing to sell, and two from the state that they would be selected in the program to much later. And we tried to reach out as soon as we had that information. But again, it was hard to reach out when we didn't know where the locations were initially. We just applied to the program to be part of the grant funding. And that came from staff and homeless advocates. The Board of Supervisors did approve them going to that application because it seemed like an opportunity that's something we've been looking for a long time, to interject funding to create permanent housing rather than depend on the goodwill of all our landlords that are taking part in the landlord partnership program, providing 1 or 2 units throughout the county for our homeless. And that's where the 291 units have come from, mostly through that program.
Dennis, don't you think you should have informed the individual towns before you started sending out letters to see who would be willing to sell their property. You know, towns and cities are separate entities. They're not subdivisions of the county. They have their own laws, they have their own ordinances. And if town managers had known, if town planning directors had known, they could have even helped. And as I say, the public would have had a chance to discuss it. It wouldn't be something that comes up now and people start questioning, you know, some of the things that have been on Nextdoor, though at least 75% has been positive, of, you know, who are these people? What are they going to do? Or my property value is going to go down. All of these things would not be coming up now. And that is what the problem is. And that's where the county did not do its job. And that's where the Board of Soups either has to do it themselves or have employees who do it for them.
Yeah. Thank you, Phyllis. I don't know the timeline of notification and what work was done previous, you know, until it came to the board at a certain point and we approved being part of the application process, the home key. That was the first the board made it policy decisions, but related to the work and the outreach before that, I don't have a timeline. I don't know if what was done and what wasn't done. But I do think that there probably was some discussion at different places at managers meetings and other things that this program at least was available at the state.
Yeah. Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you, Phyllis. Guys, I want to get to at least one more person if we can here. Joe, Stephen, Steve, and Mary. I saw at least some of you guys are putting questions in the chat. Everybody who's still got questions, please put them in the chat. And we or the supervisor's office will follow up with you offline because we want to get to all these questions. Thank you, Phyllis. We're going to go to Omar next, and I think we're going to be out of time after that. Todd, did you want to jump in with anything?
I'll wait till the end.
Okay, Omar is coming on here.
Everyone, I know there's some disappointment in the chat. You know, this wasn't our intent to problem solve this issue in 1 hour. Every opportunity we have as a town and a community, we're engaging you to continue this conversation. November 2nd will really be, we're going to dedicate our entire council meeting to this subject on what success looks like for Corte Madera. And so put that on your calendars. It's at 6:30. And so again, just don't be disappointed, be engaged and part of the process. Please put your question down in the chat and we will continue this conversation on the 2nd.
Okay, thank you, Omar. Super fast, like 1 minute, because we're going to have to roll right at 5.
Perfect. Hello, Mayor, Supervisor. Thank you for the invitation and for creating the space to have a conversation around something that's affecting us all. A quick context, the housing crisis that we currently have right now that we're trying to resolve in the midst of the pandemic is a historical issue that we have had. It has been the lack of willingness to build housing and to add more capacity to make sure that people are not homeless. So let's recognize that as we continue with this conversation. Lack of affordable housing is the primary cause of homelessness. And short-term housing and permanent housing is the safest solution for both the public health emergency and people's long-term well-being. So if we're gonna create a task force to make sure that we do this implementation right, I welcome that and I volunteer myself to support that. But if we're gonna be creating a task force to slow down the process like we have done historically in Marin County, I really discourage you to do that. Right now we have a housing crisis that can put at risk the economy. We move to the next year, we're gonna be reopening. And I think that brings a lot of value to the entire community. If we don't deal with the housing crisis, we're gonna start closing again very soon. So I really encourage you to continue with this project. I really support the county and the city in the direction that you're going. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Omar. Supervisor, do you want to make any closing comments before we wrap up here? We've got 1 minute. You're muted, sir.
I continue to welcome the comments and the conversation. Please reach out to me, D. Rodoni at marincounty.org. And send me your email, send me your questions, and be glad to return phone calls or whatever and talk to people. And if you decide to have another session like this, I'd be more than glad to come back and certainly bring some other resource people with me too if it need be. Because I think it's important that the conversation continue and the discussion continue so that we can share what will be going on this site as much as we know now and tell you about the programs that we have in place that would be very similar so you can compare to what you might have.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor. Appreciate you being here with us. Appreciate all the residents who joined us and brought up important questions and thoughts about this issue. Thank you to all the staff for being on the line here. We're going to have to go right now because we've got another meeting. It's on the pension situation. Anybody who's a resident of Corte Madera, you guys are all welcome to join us. It's a public meeting. The link to join is on the town's website. Thanks again to everybody who took the time to be here, and we will see you soon.
Yeah, thanks to you all.
Supervisor.
Thank you.